Did Mercedes really find a way to have more energy than everyone else, without apparently breaking the rules? Or are we facing the biggest technical scandal of the new era of Formula One after the Chinese GP? Mercedes has gone from being a team in reconstruction to becoming the epicenter of the biggest technical controversy at the beginning of the new hybrid era, and everything breaks out just after the Chinese Grand Prix, where several teams begin to notice something that does not fit, something that does not follow the natural rules of performance in Formula One, because while the rest suffer with energy management, lifting their foot, recharging the battery and losing performance on the straight, the W17 seems to behave differently, as if it had access to an extra reserve that appears just at the moment's key, an advantage that should not exist under the current limitations of the regulation. The suspicion is not born from rumors or empty statements, it is born from data, from shared telemetry, from millimeter analysis that teams like Ferrari and Red Bull have been carrying out in silence, observing how Mercedes deploys its energy in specific areas of the Shanghai circuit, especially in the back straight, where an anomalous pattern is detected, an electrical impulse that is not only stronger, but also lasts longer than should be possible, completely breaking with the logic of the current hybrid system, and it is at that point where the word trick begins to gain strength within the paddock. Because here we are not talking about a simple efficiency improvement, it is not that Mercedes has optimized its system, it is that everything indicates that they have found a way to manipulate the delivery of energy, to stretch it beyond the established limits, as if they were redistributing electrical power in a way that the regulation does not directly contemplate, which opens an extremely dangerous gray area, where the legal and the illegal blur and where innovation can quickly become infringement. The FIA, upon seeing the magnitude of the accusations and the direct pressure from several teams, has had no choice but to act, initiating a formal investigation that puts the heart of the Mercedes car under scrutiny, its power unit, but more specifically its ERS system, the one in charge of recovering and deploying energy, because that is where the real secret could be hidden, a system that, if confirmed, would completely change the way we understand performance in this new Formula One. And the most disturbing thing of all is that this possible trick would not be something obvious. It is not a visible piece or an easy-to-detect aerodynamic element. We are talking about software, engine maps, settings that could be activated only in very specific conditions, which would make the system go unnoticed in standard checks, functioning as an invisible advantage that appears only when it matters most, in qualifying, in overtaking, or at critical moments of the race. Thus, Mercedes is not only competing on the track, it is playing on a much more complex terrain, where engineering, regulations, and the interpretation of the limits are mixed, and where every small detail can make the difference between dominating the category or facing a historic sanction that changes the course of the entire season. This is where the story takes a much more technical and, at the same time, more disturbing turn, because we are no longer talking just about general suspicions, but about how this supposed system that has Mercedes in its sights could really be working, a mechanism that would not be a single obvious trap, but a combination of several layers of engineering working together to create an advantage almost impossible to detect under normal conditions. The first pillar of this possible trick would be in the deployment of energy, in how the car delivers electrical power on a straight line, and according to the analysis of rivals, Mercedes could be using a kind of internal redistribution system, a secondary circuit that would allow energy to be re-injected at specific times, artificially lengthening the time in which the ERS is delivering power, something that in theory is limited by regulation, but which here would be stretched through extremely sophisticated management, almost as if the car you will find small windows within the system to continue pushing when others can no longer. The second component is even more delicate because it enters the realm of software, and this is where everything becomes much more difficult to control, since we are talking about hidden engine maps, configurations that are not permanently active, but are turned on under very specific conditions, such as certain battery charge levels or specific thermal ranges, which would allow the car to have a completely different behavior for a few key seconds without leaving a constant pattern that can be easily detected by the FIA, turning the system into something practically invisible in standard checks. But what really breaks the mold is the third element, energy recharging, because this is where Mercedes could be giving the final blow. A pattern of energy recovery has been detected even when the car is accelerating fully, something that directly contradicts the traditional model of the hybrid system, where energy is recovered mainly during braking, and if this is true, it would mean that Mercedes not only manages energy better, but is literally generating more than the system should allow. Under normal conditions, creating an almost continuous charge and discharge cycle that eliminates of the greatest weaknesses of the current regulations. And when you put these three pieces together, extended deployment, hidden maps, and abnormal recharging, what you get is not an incremental improvement, it is a structural advantage, a completely different way of understanding the hybrid system, where Mercedes could be avoiding the famous clipping that affects the rest of the teams, that moment in which they run out of energy on a straight line and lose performance, something that simply does not happen here, which would explain why its car seems to maintain power when the others begin to fall. This also connects with another key point that has further inflamed the controversy, the possibility of an indirect bypass of the measurement systems, what some already call the phantom ERS, a theory that suggests that Mercedes could be generating or using energy in ways that do not completely pass through the standard sensors of the regulation, which would not only complicate detection, but would put in check the FIA's ability to control this type of innovations in real time. That is why the investigation is not superficial. The FIA is not looking for an illegal part, it is trying to decipher a complete system, an operating architecture that could be playing at the limit of the regulations or even crossing it in a way so sophisticated that it redefines what it means to cheat in modern Formula One. And this is where everything explodes, because if what the FIA is investigating is confirmed, the consequences would not only be for Mercedes, they would be for the entire Formula One, since we would not be talking about a simple technical violation, but rather an interpretation of the regulations so advanced that it would force us to completely rethink the basis of this new hybrid era, especially at a time where the energy management system was already being questioned by drivers, teams, and the federation itself. Because the problem is not just that Mercedes has an advantage, the real problem is that if they have found a way to avoid clipping, to maintain constant power while the rest lose performance to recharge the battery, then they have broken the fundamental balance that defines these rules, that compromise between attacking and conserving energy, between speed and efficiency, and if that balance disappears, the whole show changes, the strategy stops making sense, and technical equality is completely broken. The FIA then faces an extremely delicate decision, because it has three paths and none of them are simple. The first would be to declare the Mercedes system illegal, which would imply sanctions, possible disqualifications, and a direct hit to the championship, something that always generates controversy and political tensions within the paddock. The second path would be to allow it, accepting that Mercedes has simply interpreted the regulations better, which would force the rest of the teams to copy or develop similar solutions, starting a new technological war that could skyrocket costs and increase the differences even more. And the third scenario, perhaps the most likely, would be to modify the rules mid-process, closing this legal loophole to prevent it from being repeated, something that has already happened in the past but always leaves doubts about competitive fairness. And in the midst of all this, Mercedes not only defends its technical position, but also its reputation, because here it is not just about winning races, it is about how it is won. And if this system is considered illegal, the impact will not only be sporting, it will also be historical, marking this stage as one of the most controversial of modern Formula One. While if they manage to demonstrate that everything is within the regulations, then they will have hit the table that would place them as the great dominators of the beginning of the era. 2026. But there is one last point that makes it even more interesting, and that is that this situation has exposed a clear weakness in the current regulations, a crack that perhaps no one fully anticipated, because the fact that the possibility of such a system exists shows that energy management, which should be the pillar of this new Formula One, is not completely armored, and that forces the FIA to react not only for Mercedes, but to protect the future of the category. Thus, what began as a suspicion on a Shanghai straight has become a case that could redefine the championship, the regulations, and the way we understand engineering in Formula One, leaving a question in the air that still has no definitive answer. Are we seeing pure genius, or one of the biggest traps ever created within the sport? What is happening with Mercedes is not simply another controversy within Formula One, it is a reflection of what has always defined this sport, that blurred limit between brilliant innovation and extreme interpretation of the regulations, where the great teams not only compete on the track, but also on the margins of what is allowed, looking for that small loophole that can make the difference between winning or dominating. Because if something has become clear after the Chinese Grand Prix, it is that Mercedes has found something that has made the entire grid react, something that has forced the FIA to intervene directly and open an in-depth investigation. And that already tells us a lot. We are not facing just any improvement, we are facing a concept that, legal or not, has changed the conversation within the paddock and has called into question the solidity of the regulations in this new hybrid era. Right now, the future of this story is completely open. Mercedes could emerge strengthened as the team that best understood the rules, or could face a very hard blow if it is proven that they crossed the line. But beyond the final result, what is truly important is what this represents. Because this case has already left a clear mark, it has exposed a weakness in the system, It has ignited a political and technical battle between teams, and it has forced the FIA to rethink to what extent it has real control over energy management in Formula One modern. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.